Kia ora, Rotorua. How are we all? Thank you for those who are going to join us, because there's been quite a lot of discussion lately between the different districts. And tonight, it's going to be my pleasure to go through and share a little bit about what's called the Head Start process. Now, this is going to be a pretty big decision for us on where and who we choose to go with. So tonight I will be going through a few maps and giving you a bit of information on what Head Start actually looks like. So as we just wait for people to join, what I'll do is just give a little bit of an update. So first of all, some quick house rules. Tonight we will specifically be talking about Head Start, but if you do pop in the comments any questions that you have about anything else other than the reforms of the mergers of council, and then please know that we will get back to you as soon as possible, like immediately after this, and if needed we'll do another post or update for you as well so that you can know. So I know it's a really busy time of night for family. I think normally I'm trying to feed my 3-year-old right now and failing miserably, but whether you're tuning in from home or anywhere else, look, thank you very much for spending some time with me tonight. Me, Tania Tapsell, here to talk about potential mergers of councils. So I know that there are a lot of questions in the community, so as we're going, please feel free to put in your questions in the comments, and then after I do the explainer, I'll jump right in and try to answer those questions. And as mentioned, if there's questions about other things, then we'll reply to you later in the comments. Please also just be respectful of one another as well in the comments. No haters, please. If you do have any complaints, feel free to email them through. But tonight is all about the positive and what our future could look like, because it could be quite different for us. So let me jump right into it. Why are we even talking about mergers of councils? Like, why do we need a change? Now, this has come from government, and I suppose their reason I can kind of understand. They want councils to find better efficiencies. We already want to find affordability, but what government believes is that potentially by merging with other councils and allowing through a Head Start pathway process, so they're basically making bespoke legislation for us to be able to do this, but they're hoping that councils can merge. What does that look like? I'll share some maps with you shortly, but currently we have 7 councils in the Bay of Plenty. 7 councils, so if the government gets their way, there will be much less. But the big question for you tonight, and we will have a survey link in the comments as well, the big question for you tonight is, if we have to merge, who and where should we go with? Who should we partner with? So in late 2025, the government started consulting on their Simplify Local Government. This is where you hear some of those proposals coming out, such as should we have rates capping? There's a lot of reform. But one of the big changes is our regional councils are now being disestablished from the councillors. So from 2028, at the end of their term, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, including other regional councils, will no longer have their councillors. So the government has removed regional council. Now that's pretty massive, because regional council's sole purpose is to look after the environment, mostly land, water and air. And so the future will look quite different, because we're going to set up what's called a unitary authority. Now think of it like unity, like bringing together, because we're going to bring together the regional council functions and then also the functions of the territorial authorities or the local councils. Big question though, which is what we're going to talk about tonight, is who do we go with? So the government received a lot of submissions providing some feedback. So while they were talking about just getting rid of regional councils straight away to remove duplication, I think fortunately they have listened to many of us who said, please just let them finish their term until 2028. But that also means that 2028, we're going to be quite different. So if we go through the Head Start proposal, this will mean that by the next local government election, you could potentially be voting for a mayor over a multiple districts, including council representation. So this probably comes to one of the key concerns or things that we're investigating, is what does local representation still seem like? because one of the key feedback pieces that we've received from you already, and thank you so much, we had about just over 300 people provide feedback, and the key thing was representation. What does that look like? And then secondly, importantly, financials. So is this even going to be more affordable? And I do want to acknowledge the concerns in the community that, you know, we've seen a couple of mergers over the years. We've seen the tertiary education for us, Toiho Mai, also our local health boards, and we haven't always seen the efficiencies, benefits, or affordability that we wanted from it. So don't worry, we are doing as much as possible in the short time frames to figure out what that means. But already the financials are coming back showing that Rotorua could be sustainable by itself. What can we do across the region though, maybe, to deliver better services? And that's the questions that I want to talk with you about now. Now, big thing, and we'll put the link in the comments, is we do have a participate engagement platform. This is our online survey for you to please jump in. You will see maps and options that we're providing you, and it's really, really, really important that we hear from you, because this is a big decision for our future. And while we have the pleasure and the honour of being the council now, we need to make sure that your council in future makes sense for you as well. So jump on our Rotorua Lakes Council website and all the survey that we'll put in the comments as well. So let's get right into it. What does the future hold? This is one of the potential options. So as I mentioned, we have multiple different councils. Here we are, Rotorua, totally the best. But then we also have towards the east, Whakatane, Opotiki and Kawerau, and towards the west, Tauranga and Western Bay. Now we've heard very clearly from our community that they're not keen on going towards Tauranga because they are a bigger population and there are concerns about their debt. Of course, we want to make sure that whatever affordability, rates, finance looks like in future, that you are also paying for what you want. And that's one of the key concerns about Tauranga being a high growth area. Also Western Bay. But the good news is, and I've been talking with all the mayors across the Bay of Plenty, even as recently as just before this live, Tauranga and Western Bay are working really closely together already on their water services, and they are looking like they will submit what's called a sub-region. And I'll get to the sub-region soon. But in the Eastern Bay of Plenty, Kawerau, Opotiki and Whakatane also have natural alignment. So that kind of leaves out just Rotorua. What does that mean for us? We need to consider that if the government does push us, and there has been a few people that have been like, oh, maybe we should just call the government's bluff. I think if you look at many of the other changes they're making, they weren't bluffing. So the risk is if we don't do the Head Start proposal, we will end up in what's called the backstop, the next option. Now, backstop, based on what government's currently telling us, will be a Bay of Plenty wide. So as responsible leaders for Rotorua, we know that we need to put forward something to say, if you push us into needing to merge with another council, these are the ones that we would prefer to go with. Ta-da! This is probably my personal fave, but I need you to go into our survey and make sure that you let us know what your favourite is. This is Rotorua with Taupo and South Waikato. So as you know, between Rotorua and Taupo, we have geothermal, we have forestry, we have farming, we have quite a massive area of communities of interest, as well as economic alignment. Then you look to South Waikato. Now that's Tokoro, for those who are wondering. Tokoro. Their forestry and our forestry are very similar, and actually many people, and my dad included, who used to work at the mill there, and myself when I played touch and Tokoro and stuff, there is still a lot of connection between Rotorua and Tokoro. And so we so far seem like we'd be better suited to go towards Taupo and South Waikato as opposed to having to be a Bay of Plenty region. So the catch to that is, while that may be our preferred option and what we've heard from our community already so far, Taupo and South Waikato may be looking on the other side. So a lot of us, when I've had discussions with the mayors, we sort of laugh about, it's like we're dating, you know, we're all dating and trying to figure out who will be best with who. And Taupo have been quite clear that their preferred option right now is to go the other side. Now, remember, we are a bigger population than Taupo. So Taupo are looking towards Ruapehu, which is a beautiful big district, a lot of small communities there though, and also towards places like Otorohanga and South Waikato. So we're kind of in this situation now where we're going, South Waikato, where do you want to go? And if South Waikato do want to go with us in Rotorua, then that's when we'll say, are you sure, Taupo, do you just want to come with us, or do you want to go towards Waikato? If this sounds complex, it's because it is. So this is what we're already hearing from the community. We want to hear from you though. Don't forget to fill out that survey. But what if Taupo does choose, it is actually better for us to go the other way, and or South Waikato? That's when we'll go and look at other options. Now, the Cuzzies in the east. So I do genuinely love the eastern mares. We've got awesome mares. We've got Faylene in Kawerau. We've got Nando in Whakatane. We've got David in Opotiki. And they've been working really closely together. In fact, Rotorua has been working closely with them as well for our waters. Now, this is our drinking water, wastewater, stormwater, and making sure that actually in future our water services are delivered well. So we're already working together based on government reforms, I should say. We're probably always usually just like, we'll stay in our lane, just in our own districts, but we've already been working together. So if we were pushed, and if Taupo decided not to partner up with us, we would likely at this stage be most suitable with the eastern region. Again, we need to hear from you, because if there's any strong pushback, we must consider that too. The only pushback we really have had so far is this option. I want to say our fancy Cuzzies. Are they even Cuzzies? Our fancy colleagues in Tauranga and also in Western Bay. So the pushback that we've had, as mentioned, is on the debt and also the quite incredible growth that Western Bay has and Tauranga have been experiencing. So naturally, because we don't have all the information yet, based on the timelines government has given us, naturally there is concern that if we do end up with them, we might end up paying for some of their growth. Now, I will be straight up. I've talked with Mayor Mahe Drysdale over there, previous gold medal Olympian. He does a fantastic job as a mayor, and he's been quite clear that if we did end up that way, he would want to look at ring fencing the debt. So that basically Tauranga pays for the growth in Tauranga, and also cool relationship with our Western Bay Mayor, James. James has also been doing an awesome job. Western Bay is actually pretty massive. So I'm going to bring it real close. That's little Tauranga there with the massive population. And then, as you can see, Western Bay is this whole massive area. So Western Bay, for what most of us know Western Bay as, is actually is from Maketu. So Maketu all the way to Katikati. So far, massive region. So whether or not we end up with Tauranga and Western Bay is really up to you as well. So make sure you fill in that survey. So you're probably thinking by now, okay, we've got Taupo, South Waikato, we've got the eastern regions, but we also have maybe Tauranga and Western Bay. Are there any other options? Really good question. It's just a random one we came up with. But at first, we were told that it must be a whole council boundary that we merge with. Fortunately, since then, we have heard from the Minister of Local Government that it's really up to us. What makes sense to us, put that in a proposal, and they will make what's called bespoke legislation. They will literally make new rules. So while some people may be looking at this as, oh man, that's such a big job, why do we have to merge? Like maybe a lot of us mayors are thinking that. It is also a real opportunity to say, but what makes sense for us? Now, we've been working really closely alongside our iwi partners, so thank you very much to our Te Arawa iwi chairs. Our Te Arawa iwi chairs has been helping us with the co-design on what could this look like, because as we know, there are plenty of treaty settlements. In fact, we've got over 30 treaty settlements within Rotorua, which is why working alongside mana whenua, iwi and hapu is really important, as well as them being significant landowners. But if you put an environmental context and lens on this, as well as iwi boundaries, that's where you come up with the final map that I'm going to show you tonight. Mai maketu ki Tongariro, the Rotorua Kaituna catchment option. So, for those of you who know, we call Rotorua ane te takere o te waka o te aroa. This is the middle of the te aroa waka. It starts in Maketu and finishes in beautiful Tongariro in the Ruapehu district as it is now. What we also know is Lake Rotorua, Rotorua Nui a Kahumata Moimoi, actually drains down the Oho Channel through Okere, the beautiful Okere Falls with the Mina's coffee and cafe there, and then down the Kaituna River through to the area of Tapuika and Waitaha Iwi, and out, of course, to beautiful Maketu, where you can get your pies and your fish and chips, and of course be at the heart of where Te Aroa Waka first landed. So we know that our community does have a connection from an iwi perspective, and importantly, when we consider what councils do and what we will have to take over the functions of the regional council, protecting the environment but protecting our water is incredibly important. And so whether or not we wanted to consider a catchment perspective. Now, a catchment perspective is basically, think about it this way. When the rain falls, and we're in a caldera in Rotorua, right? And so all the rain that comes through are different rivers and streams, and they end up in Lake Rotorua, which is also why we have very high lake levels when it rains a lot. But of course, where does that water then go? It goes down that stream of Oho, Okere, Kaituna, then to Maketu. So that would be our catchment. Catchment perspectives are interesting to consider, because if we were thinking about going with Taupo and or South Waikato, their catchment, including a lot of around Rotorua, actually goes towards the Waikato River. So again, this is where your feedback is very important. We are considering a number of different criteria, including the financials. Is that going to even be more affordable? Would it even be better? Iwi and hapu interest, communities of interest, obviously those economic links that I talked about, geothermal, forestry, farming. Is there anything else that we have missed that you think we need to consider? Is there one of these maps or options that you feel really strongly we either should or we shouldn't do? Please go onto that survey, share it with your mates, share it with your whānau, and make sure that you provide our feedback. Look, I'm pretty stoked that we've got so many people watching, but now really is a time for you to be able to ask any questions. So if you have any questions, what I'm going to do is check in with my staff who are here helping me. They're going to read out the question because I can't see everything on here, and then I'll answer as best as I can. So I'll just check in. Do we have any questions? Cool.
First one, does Rotorua Lakes Council become the consenting body for regional council?
Do we become the consenting body for regional council? That's a very good question, because we actually just saw recently that for building consents, the government is looking to change that to create a national building consent authority. For now, what I'd say is because regional council laws are being removed by 2028, now the unitary authority, whatever that looks like, whether it's Rotorua, whole of Bay of Plenty, any, that unitary authority will take over the functions, including the consenting. And so it's interesting because you think even between Bay of Plenty and Waikato Regional Council, those will be, depending where you live, different consenting authorities, that will now merge fully into the unitary authority. So yes, the unitary authority will take over, probably most of it. The functions of the Regional Council, FYI, that we're focusing on the most for this decision is the catchment environment, the transport, because obviously that's a massive part, looking after our roads, and also, of course, our regional spatial planning, where we're going to have growth. So where we have growth, where there may be new buildings, new industries, that's where the consenting will come to the new unitary. But the government is, as I mentioned, only just recently announced that they, as part of the simplifying local government reforms, they will also make changes and take some of that consenting to the Building Consenting Authority.
How does the Bay of Plenty Regional Council shares in Port of Tauranga get distributed across the region?
Yes, just had a question about how Quayside, the Bay of Plenty Regional Council, the Port of Tauranga is only one of the investments, pretty major one, in Quayside, but they basically are able to, through their millions of dollars of dividends, provide subsidies which they currently do to their regional council rates. What they also do, though, is invest across the region. Importantly, environment is a key factor, but also economic investment. So that Rangiru Business Park, when you're like going past Papamoa on your way to the Mount, that's also one of the Quayside investments. Now, the Regional Council have consulted on this. There's been a bit of to-ing and froing because they were going down the process of divesting those assets because they know that they'll be finished in 2028, of shifting that $3 billion worth of assets into an independent trust. And that was going to make sure that those assets are locked up, protected, to be there for benefit across the region in what we call perpetuity, forever. They have a strong focus on ensuring that whatever the future holds, the environment still has investment in it. So that's a quick recap of what this Quayside is. We don't yet have the certainty on how it will be distributed across the region. So the mayors across the Bay of Plenty, we wrote a letter to the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and also recently to the Minister of Local Government to ensure that whatever the new form of unitary authority councils are, that they get to have a say in how the benefits of Quayside, the investments, the returns, are actually distributed across the region. I will say that I've had really good feedback from the Regional Council, who we work very closely with, and they are committed to ensuring that whatever the future holds, it is as evenly as possible distributed across the region.
Does the government have a preferred option?
Does the government have a preferred option? I think when they told us you need to reform and merge or else, that was pretty strong, or else. So their preferred option is pretty much the ministers who have commented so far want to see the bigger regions. So I would say quite confidently that all the messaging that we're getting is that we should consider how big can we go in terms of those efficiencies. If you think about how that might look practically, if we ended up being the government's preferred whole region, if you look at that practically, that's kind of Auckland. So Auckland became a super council, but then to protect the local voice, they also had local boards. And those local boards were given quite a lot of power actually, and also funding to be able to still make sure that there's locally elected people within your neighbourhood, or for us within our district. So that is an option that we could go down actually, and there is a way for us to ensure that there's still a local voice. The key decision we need to make by the 9th of August, council decision will be on the 29th of July, is do we even want to go into this Head Start pathway? Do we want to be the masters of our own future, our own destiny, and tell the government what we want? Because if we don't, the government's been clear that then we fall into the backstop. So they'll focus on creating the legislation, supporting, creating those new council boundaries. And then once they're finished doing that with everyone who said, yep, we'll jump ahead, we'll do the Head Start pathway. When they finish that, then they're going to get on to all the rest of the councils that said, oh no, we're not ready, we don't want to. And they will make a decision for us. Now, if you're wondering, but how can they even do that? Is it even legal? Quite honestly, I thought that when they said that regional councillors were going to be gone, but truth is, yes, this government has the power to tell us as councils what to do. And councils run under what's called the Local Government Act, and the Local Government Act is established, and if it's changed, is changed through government and the Minister of Local Government, who currently is Minister Simon Watts. So yes, the councils are basically having to respond to what is a government reform for us.
If you go the way of South Waikato catchment, for example, does this mean Rotorua becomes part of Waikato? What larger impact does that have down the track politically?
Cool. So we just had a question around if we go with South Waikato, does that mean that Rotorua is now part of the Waikato region? I would say solid no. It would actually mean South Waikato would come into the Bay of Plenty region. Now, that's not all. Also want to make you aware that on the other side of our Bay of Plenty region, we have had Thames Coromandel hit us up. Ms. Bay of Plenty Mayors come along and do a bit of a presentation, and Thames Coromandel Mayor Peter is working alongside Tauranga and Western Bay of Plenty. So if that happens, they'll also come into the Bay of Plenty region. We're not quite sure what that would mean for us, but we'll definitely be making sure that it isn't to the detriment of Rotorua. So just like South Waikato would come to Bay of Plenty, Thames Coromandel would come to Bay of Plenty. Why? Because when you look at the majority of councils, if a council in another region joins wherever the majority of councils are, that will be the region. So we will be the Bay of Plenty region if we go with South Waikato, which is Tokoro.
How is this all going to impact our rates? Does that change depending on which way we jump?
How does this impact our rates? This has been where we've been like crunch time. Our staff have done an incredible job trying to get these numbers, because we know, and the government, when they said, okay, you now have 90 days to figure out who you want to go with, that was like 100% absolutely not enough time for us to be able to do the due diligence, which would normally take a couple of years to do a transition. So what we know from the figures is that technically, financially, we will be better, like we currently are fine by ourselves, we'll be better off. Where we should think about this, though, for the future, is even though we're fine right now, and we're under debt limits, and so far as we know, able to deliver services as affordably as possible, we are just like one natural disaster away from being a little bit screwed. So put it this way, if we had a massive flooding event or earthquake, we would not have enough debt capacity in the council's balance sheet and our lending to be able to borrow enough to replace the significant core service infrastructure. Think roads, pipes, facilities, pools, fields, all of that. We would need significant help from the government and also potentially working with other councils. So this is one of the very interesting facts around merging, which is why you might have heard of the water services. Previously it was 3 waters. The whole concept around linking up with other councils, even if we ring fence our debt, it actually, the bigger you are, the bigger your equity, the more that you're able to borrow. Now, we don't borrow for no reason. Council debt is definitely different to your household debt, where you're borrowing and you'll pay it back one day. Council debt is borrowing to invest to provide the facilities. So I will also be upfront. I have had feedback from Taupo and others that are like, well, actually, we don't like the Rotorua Council debt. It's a lot higher than ours. But then we say, yeah, because we actually invested, and we won't have the troubles of, dare I say it, the troubles of sewage spills or pipes bursting, because we have just finished a significant upgrade to our wastewater treatment plant where all the sewage gets treated. Sorry, this is not like very, I hope you're not having dinner while you're watching this. But also, things like our museum, our swimming pool, we have actually invested so that our community has great facilities, which means that we don't expect to have to invest significantly in future, whereas other councils, and this is really the crux of it, this is why government sort of jumped in and said, we want councils to change, because some councils haven't invested as wisely, and then their assets are basically falling apart, the communities can't afford it, and then government has to jump in and help out. So I hope that makes sense. We are okay financially now. After we decide whether or not to go through Head Start, here's the timing actually. 9th of August, we make the decision, who will we go with? Then we're kind of locked in. Like, we're asking the government, oh, what if we change our mind? Well, tough luck, they say. And so I was actually asking the Minister of Local Government, saying, but what if we do have time to crunch the numbers and it's actually not more affordable or more efficient like you want? Can we bail? Can we jump out then? And basically the feedback from him and Department of Internal Affairs, DIA staff who advised him was actually, no, like it would need to be quite significant, and it can't just be the community or the council changing their mind. Like there would need to be a significant, this is going to be so much more detrimental. So that shows pretty clearly that they do want councils to merge. Again, do we jump in with Head Start and be masters of our own destiny and say which limited amount of councils do we go with? Or do we just try push back and fight and say, nah, not us, and then we end up in their backstop, which is very likely going to be a Bad Plenty region. I'm sorry, I am 100% speculating. We don't know for sure. There is an election coming up, but we have also heard from the Labour Party as well, so current Minister and Government's coalition. We have heard from the opposition of the Labour Party as well that they're not looking to do significant reversals of this, but they would have preferred to give us more time, which we definitely needed. So 9th of August, then it will go to Cabinet. Cabinet will decide in September, just before their election. And from September, if we get the approval of, yes, you can go ahead with working with either Taupo or Whakatane or Tauranga, but maybe not them. Yes, you can go ahead. And then we have time to do proper community consultation. We're doing our best, and please make sure you fill out the survey. Then we have time to do proper community consultation, crunch all the numbers, do the research and the due diligence that we normally would for, I think it's March, the start, yeah, early next year will be then when it's finalised, and whether we get the final tick of approval from Cabinet, from Government, to then start the transition process. What that means for you is maybe in 2028, you will be voting for a new unitary council. I'll be clear as well. Example, if we went with Taupo and South Waikato, or all of our Western or Eastern councils, if we went with Taupo and South Waikato, that would mean, as we know it so far, you would have one council, one mayor, and maybe depending on representation, we could either have local boards of each district, or you would have a distribution of councillors. So you'll have some councillors from Rotorua, some from Taupo, some from South Waikato. What we also need to consider, and something that the Rotorua Council is trying to get more information on, is, well, what does that mean for Māori wards? Because not that long ago, in the last election, we just had a binding referendum where Rotorua chose to go with Māori wards, but actually over the boundary in Taupo, they didn't. And so we're trying to get an answer from the government. What they're saying is just put forward a proposal that you want. We feel that's a little, I don't know, we don't really like that, because a binding referendum should be binding. So Rotorua needs to consider that as well, as we'll have Māori wards on our side, but maybe not in Taupo. And I think South Waikato hasn't had them from the start. Anyway, I'll have to check on that, so don't quote me, but yeah. So representation will be a pretty big thing there.
If we amalgamate with Tauranga, will we then be paying water rates?
Haha, there's been a question on water rates. My reading of the situation, because the government's asking us to set up what are called water council controlled organisations, CCOs. So waters is actually one of the biggest costs to council. And so just as this whole pushing councils to merge is looking at making us bigger so that we can borrow more, so that we can invest more, the whole water situation was that as well. The question came on if we merge with Tauranga, but I'd say already we're doing work with the Eastern councils, so it would be unlikely that would end up in a water situation with Tauranga. If this sounds confusing, I'm sorry, it kind of is, but just think of waters, of everything council does, waters has been put in its own bubble, in its own box, and waters is being dealt with separately. What that leaves is all the other council functions, and interesting, the next biggest cost is transport, and that will be a big function that we're about to take on from regional council. Once you remove the waters and also the transport, actually everything else we do is within 2% normally of rates anyway. So the majority of your rates go on waters and transport. So when the government's also talking about providing a rates cap where councils can only rate, I actually kind of like this, where councils can only rate between 2 and 4%, with waters gone, with like it's going to be kind of a lot easier for many councils across the country. So to your actual question, will we have to pay water rates? We haven't discussed water rates in any of the water services discussions that we've had with Eastern Bay. We currently aren't set up to do water rates. To do water rates, you also need water meters. We don't have water meters in Rotorua. So it will be quite a significant undertaking to get water meters into all of our houses so that we can charge for water rates. But what I will say is, fortunately, in Rotorua, we are surrounded and have plentiful springs. So our source of fresh water is, we're very wealthy in terms of water. We're very fortunate, and we have great relationships and joint consents with iwi, including for Karamu Takinga Spring, Ngāti Kia, Ngāti Tuara, that we actually provide already 60% of our drinking water. And that all goes to your house. We don't have water meters, so we're not ready to charge for water rates. So whether it's Tauranga, who we're unlikely to go with, or anyone else, no, I can't see there being water rates anytime in the near future. Unless the government makes us do that too, but don't know if we're that keen on it yet.
What are the other councils in the region looking at? Is there a feel for what they're wanting to do?
Oh, good question. What are the other councils thinking? So as I mentioned, we did have a call, video call with all the mayors in Bay of Plenty. How it's landing is Tauranga and Western Bay are pairing up. So that's quite good because they also actually share some infrastructure. They're very close. What we're doing is we're calling them the Western sub-region. And then on the east side, towards the coast, you've got Kawerau, Whakatane and Opotiki. We're calling them the eastern sub-region. They're pairing up as well. And then that just leaves Rotorua. And it's really up to, we've opened up the door towards Taupo and South Waikato because we think they make more sense than eastern or western. But it's really up to them whether to decide. Now, all of us are making this decision towards the end of this month. We really only have about 2 or 3 weeks to make this decision as council. So even if you're tuning into this and you're from the other districts, please give your feedback to the councils. If you're from ours, the link to the survey is in the comments. Please, please, please make sure you fill it out because we will really be taking that into consideration when we choose and make a decision for Rotorua on the 29th of July.
Is it correct that there's no guarantee the government will accept a proposal?
It is correct. There is no guarantee the government will accept a proposal, and actually it's like cabinet. So it's not even all of government, it's not all of the MPs. It's just cabinet. What they will do though is they'll look at it and they'll basically determine, does it meet their criteria? So they have a number of different criteria, and some of those, it's quite kind of simple, like does it make financial sense? Is it practical? Like, is it doable? Can you even do that? So, like right at the start, someone has said to me, oh, why don't we just merge and become a unitary authority with Queenstown District? Because they're also a top tourism district. I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, we obviously didn't do that. But then some mayors have been joking like, oh, what if we did Rarotonga? I can't really like that idea. But no, it needs to be doable. Yes, it will go to cabinet. We put the submission in 9th of August, and by September, they will do it. They will do it as in they will make the decision. And then we have to get to work and make it happen, put forward a good plan and proposal, final decision towards March, I think it is.
Does it make sense for Rotorua to not be integrated in the Kaituna catchment?
It's a very good question. Does it make sense for Rotorua not to be integrated into Kaituna catchment? From an environment perspective, no. Because as I mentioned, from Lake Rotorua, even before that, our streams and rivers and then just the rainfall down into the cold air into Lake Rotorua put it this way. One of the challenges we've had is we have very high, abnormally high lake levels in Lake Rotorua. We've had that for some time because of the amount of rain. It's hard for us to lower that. And even some of our other, like when I've been out to Lake Rotorua, and if you've seen that, like it's pretty crazy. Like the lake level is so high, like the playground is in the water. It's like my 3-year-old's like, what's going on? This is cool. It's a water park. Not. But for Lake Rotorua, the catchment makes sense, because in order for us to lower those levels to make sure that we don't have any flooding or damage to our assets, we need to make sure that it can drain through the Oho Channel, down the Kaituna River to Maketu. And so that's where the whole catchment is important. I will say, though, this is also where iwi involvement, their voices, their views, and respecting their treaty settlements is really important. So if you don't know this already, Te Rotorua Lakes Trust do an awesome job protecting our taiao, our environment, but they actually own, through a treaty settlement, 14 of the lakes in our district. Lake Rotorua is one of them. And if you go down the Kaituna River towards Waitaha and Tapuika iwi have the settlement of Kaituna River. So it's pretty important for us to consider that catchment, because anything we do up here, including how we're treating our wastewater and our recovered water, so our new wastewater treatment plant that makes the sewage, actually, we just finished upgrading that, and it's now going to be some of the best treated wastewater in the country. Kind of proud of that, because we don't want to pollute our environment. But then also where we discharge that, the treated wastewater, all of that, even though it's like a tiny bit that ends up down the river, we do need to make sure that whether it's us trying to prevent flooding on this side or downstream, trying to make sure that they understand, are happy with, and that we're being respectful of whatever happens downstream is really important, because once upon a time they did used to flood downstream as well from the farms if there was too much. So, yeah.
The new regime would knock out the current boundaries, so how can the Bay of Plenty be the region if Rotorua goes with South Waikato or Taupo?
Oh, cool. So we just sort of got a few questions around the region and how, if we go with South Waikato, what that means when Bay of Plenty region's disestablished. Now, it's just the councillors that are disestablished. So the staff of that will then transition into the Unitary Authority, and the functions, the important functions that Regional Council do, will transition into this new council. If South Waikato come our way, and just as I talked about how important the Kaituna catchment is, the Waikato catchment and the Waikato River is also very important. One of the things that we can do, and I'll bring you back to this map, one of the things that we can do is actually suggest to the minister and suggest to the government that actually let's think outside the box. Let's think broader or better than our current regions. And so we can actually say, can we just have like a portion of this? So maybe the area by the Waikato River for South Waikato could stay that Waikato River catchment, which also has significant treaty settlements on it, and obviously quite significant for the rural community there. Just as we're considering, could we just have part of the Western Bay of Plenty, which is the full catchment? As an example, this would be like Te Puke and Maketu. We could do that on the other side too. What I will signal with you right now, though, is Rep Raw. I really want to know what they think, because actually they sit in between Rotorua and Taupo, and if Taupo chooses not to go with us, I am very keen on making sure that they get to have a say on where it makes sense for them to go. And Councillor Karen Barker currently does an incredible job basically getting their feedback and making sure that they get to have a say in the meantime, but we will go out again for consultation. I do see a question in here, why are regional councils locked out of talks about their future? Yeah, honestly, that does really suck. So ministers in government have a perception, and this is based on feedback that they've received elsewhere, that regional councils were like a duplication. And I do know when people have tried to get consents or do development, that they've found it really complicated having to get some consents or approval from a district council and then some from a regional council. So the whole purpose of the regional council being disestablished was to reduce duplication. Why they're locked out of talks about their future? Don't worry. We have, as the Bay of Plenty mayors, we also include the chair of the Bay of Plenty region. And Chairperson Matimoana McDonald, she is such a good leader, but she has been there with us every step of the way, helping us, advising us, and the regional councils have quite actively been working with the different councils. So that's kind of just a direction that we've personally chosen in Bay of Plenty. I'm not sure if that's consistent across the board, but yeah, we'll have to wait and see on that. And sorry, thank you, Shirley. Shirley's made a really good point that it's not only Rotorua, it's also Waikite Valley, Ngākuru, and Upper Atiamiri, 100%. And that is actually the biggest population area that sits between two different districts, which is why I think it's really important. So we need to make sure that they're looked after and they get to have a say, because I think when the government made these changes, they weren't really aware of situations like that, where you have such large communities, thousands of people that sit in between districts. Oh, thank you for the people who are saying thank you for the comments too. I really appreciate that. Joseph has said, does the Bay of Plenty watershed catchment fit within the Waiariki political boundary? Waiariki political boundary is so massive. So it is, and then bigger. I think they go all the way to Turangi, like it's the Tongariro Turangi Plateau as well. So they actually do a bit of Waikato. All of the Māori electorates are way bigger. Yeah, so that is actually a good question, and that's something we could look at as well. Oh, thank you, Julie. She was a bit dubious at the start, but she feels much better now. Joseph's also asked, which other councils' tourism aspirations align with ours? Definitely Taupo. That's why we're super keen on Taupo. Even though Tauranga does have the port of Tauranga, where a lot of cruise ships come through, yeah, Taupo's definitely where we see the most alignment. And actually, we also have economic development agencies and regional tourism operators, and we're working with ours, which is Rotorua NZ, the ones who help to sponsor and run the incredible Matariki celebrations over the week. And also shout out to Arano, you guys were awesome. I'm just quickly checking. Oh, yeah, we've got someone say, I'm just happy. Oh, Phelan, I'm just happy we're unlikely to go off Tauranga. That is based on the feedback that we've already had, but just a reminder, please, please, please fill out that survey so we can say, see, this is why we're making that decision. Hey, look, guys, I'm pretty mindful of time. Thank you to those who have stuck with me for all this time. I'm just going to quickly look through some of these. I think we may have answered all the questions. Couple more? Okay, we'll just answer a couple more. If we don't get to your question because we accidentally missed it, or if you want to put a question up after, we'll make sure we get back to you in the comments.
If we merge and create a supersized region and council, will it complicate solving local issues efficiently and effectively within a reasonable time frame and budget?
Yeah, bigger is not always better. We've seen that with other major mergers. So, as I mentioned, one of the key areas that council will be looking at is representation. How do we get that right? If we put in so big decision for now is who do we go with? Once we put that in and we say, yes, we want to explore deciding who we merge with, then that's when we can start doing the representation discussion. The local voice is really important, and so we're actually going to do what's called a representation review, where we're going to do massive consultation with our community to say not only how do you want to be represented, how many councillors do you want wards, as in like, do you want, if we went with Taupo and South Waikato, like a separate ward on that side, a separate ward for the district. We currently have a rural ward as well, and the rural ward is awesome. Karen does an incredible job there. And so the representation review will determine that, as well as how we vote. Like, is it first past the post, like you just tick all the councillors you want and one mayor, or STV, they call it, single transferable vote.
Will Rotorua Lakes Council have an internal audit system if it amalgamates with other councils?
Oh, good question on whether we'll have an internal audit system. We all have what are called audit and risk committees. And so whatever new unitary authority will have an audit and risk committee. It's best practice for us to do that. Here's a little bit of a plot twist though on some of the government's recent announcements. They also have recently said that anyone that's unelected should not be able to have voting rights on a council committee. A little bit awkward because the audit and risk committees under best practice have an independent chair who is unelected, and often two. So we'll have normally chair or a member, but they're normally the deputy chair as well. So people are there for their expert opinion. But yeah, audit and risk, don't worry, there will be an audit process, and they're definitely through DIA, the government agency, Department of Internal Affairs, will be overseeing, watching, helping us throughout this process as well. So yeah, it's going to be massive. It's unprecedented. We haven't had this since I think like the 1980s or something.
And do you want to just touch on the impact, what we know about the impact on rates? There's just a few people that missed that earlier.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. There's a few people who have been asking about the impact on rates. What we know so far is that Rotorua is financially sustainable by itself. What we don't know yet is when we transition the regional council, who the regional councillors will be removed, they will transition into the new unitary authorities. We don't yet know. We are hoping to get from them, and I think they've told us they'll get it to us by the end of the week. We don't exactly know the background of the finances of the regional council. So these are some of the complex situations that we're working through on not only what are their functions, which we have a pretty good idea of now, but also how many rates, like how much rates do they collect per district? What is the investment that they're anticipating in the next 10 years? But also, what are any like liabilities that we don't know about? So although Rotorua Council is seen to have high arrears because we actually invested in our assets, is there a super big multi-million dollar cost coming up in one of the districts or the regional council that will impact the rates, especially if it's a core service like the infrastructure of, water, roading, a significant building? I mean, fortunately for us, our museum building, which is a big ticket item, is almost complete, on time, on budget. So that will be finished in September, and then we start the exhibition. But it's those sorts of things. Is there something really big in the pipeline plan that we don't know about yet, that we're really grappling with and quite honestly scrambling to get before the very short deadline that the government has given us? So Rotorua by itself will be fine. If we go with anyone else, those are the sort of questions that we're asking. Last question.
This is a broader regional conversation question. What happens with Kaingaroa, Murupara, Minginui, Ngāti Whare, etc.? They tend to be the lost region that utilise Rotorua services, hospitals, supermarkets, etc., but have mixed regional coverage where funding often doesn't follow them. Are they part of our thinking when it comes to merging?
I hope you can hear that. So it's basically just the question on, well, what happens to the smaller communities, especially like Murupara, Kaingaroa, Minginui? That's such a good question, because like even though we think of our whānau and Murupara as like already part of us, they are actually part of the Whakatane district. And so there's all of, and even if you think of Tū Whare Toa iwi, hapu, Tū Whare Toa are not only taupo, they also go towards the back of our districts to Kawero. And so very good question. What happens to the smaller communities? This is where we really need to get it right in terms of what bespoke arrangement we put in. So Kaingaroa is currently within the Rotorua district, although they do have their own Kaingaroa Village Council, and Murupara is currently in the Whakatane district. So I think that's a good sort of line of where we'll then split. And so Murupara will continue to be in the Eastern Bay unless Murupara / Whakatane say, actually we want that to be different. But what we know so far, if we do look at the maps, is that it's I'm gonna show you this one again, because there's little kawerau. And by the way, this tiniest little, only kawerau in Chatham Islands are like this big. So kawerau would be the smallest, but I think Chatham Islands maybe just is one of them. But they are actually in the best financial position. So they have like hardly any debt, very minimal debt. They've invested in the infrastructure. They've got booming industry with their mills and their forestry. So like I said, bigger's not always better. But back to the point of what happens with the smaller communities. As you can see with Rotorua, there's a lot of community. Oh, sorry, wasn't even sure. There's a lot of communities in here that actually need to also be able to have a say. And even for Rotorua, oh, sorry, I could have shown you, but for Rotorua in here, you've got like Rotoiti, Rotoma, Rotoehu. Like, they're only a very short driving distance from kawerau as well. So even though currently they're within the Rotorua district, what I would say is that survey is in the link in the comments. If you are from that area or you care about that area and you have a view that it could be in a different district boundary, now is your time to let us know. If we go through with the Head Start proposal with whomever, could just be us as well within the Bay of Plenty region. Actually, I'll explain that real quick. Even if it is just Rotorua, that's okay. That fits within the Head Start pathway because of all of the councils within the Bay of Plenty. And Taupo is actually in there, but they fall between 4 different regions as well. Within the Bay of Plenty, because we will achieve the government's goal of 2 or more councils merging together, and your western sub-region unitary, your eastern sub-region unitary, and then Rotorua. Bear in mind, Rotorua will still have a bigger population than all of the eastern councils put together. So yes, we will be big enough, we will be financially sustainable to be by ourselves, but do you, and so we'll put in a Bay of Plenty region. We've made that commitment as mayors that would prefer to have a Bay of Plenty proposal. But what that would look like is the sub-region of East and the sub-region of West and Rotorua. We're going to take in the community feedback, which is why please fill in that survey. Take in that feedback, make our decisions for our sub-region, but then we want to put forward that proposal as a Bay of Plenty proposal. We want to do that because we want to make sure that nobody in the Bay of Plenty is forced to do something that they don't want to do. And so even if the Eastern Bay says, we're not quite ready yet, Tauranga and Western Bay are pretty ready, I think, based on feedback I've heard. So they could say, yep, we'll merge. Rotorua say, yep, we'll just stay by ourselves. But Eastern Bay might say, hey, we need a little bit more time to figure this out, to do this transition. And so as part of the proposal, that might say that. But what that does is we then, all these Bay of Plenty mayors don't pull like the sneakies on each other, because this was a very real risk in other regions, is if you have a majority population in a region, say, this is what we're going to do. Sorry, I just saw a really awkward mean comment. Don't forget I asked if you guys could be nice in the comments. No haters. It's too late for that. Working overtime here for you guys, man. I completely lost my train of thought with that last one. But pretty much, if we put in that Bay of Plenty one, we hope that means that we will protect those who may not be ready yet, and basically say we won't force anyone to do it. Because if Tauranga and Western Bay over here, basically if there was 2 or more local authorities that said this is what we want for the whole bay, so if Tauranga and Western Bay said actually we want to be one whole Bay of Plenty unitary, according to the rules of this Head Start pathway, we could all potentially be forced into that because they have majority population. So majority population in any region across the country, if they put forward a proposal, the government will consider that. So don't worry, we're working very closely alongside our other mayors across the Bay of Plenty region to make sure that we get the best not only for our districts but also the region. We don't want to force people to do it, But we are eagerly awaiting on whether Taupo and or South Waikato want to join us. So look guys, we are now at 7:30. I hope that that has been an hour of power, of awesomeness. Thank you so much for your patience. What I'm going to do is we're going to log out now. And if you have any further questions, just leave it in the comments section. We will respond to any other comments that are on there that we may have missed. But thank you once again for caring about our future. We certainly care about it a lot here at the Rotorua Lakes Council. I want to reassure you that your councillors, all of us, are working incredibly hard to make sure that we hear you, we listen to you. Please fill out that survey so we definitely know what your feedback is. And as I said, we're working very hard at the Rotorua Lakes Council, and we hope that we can have a better future for us all. So watch this space. Thank you for joining us. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou, kia pai te pō.